It wasn't an easy task trying to conjure up a feast. The prison kitchen was filled with a disjointed mixture of ingredients, half of them being of exceptionally poor quality. This was blasphemy after food, blasphemy within the cupboards. Low-fat cheese made out of rubber, skinless pre-cooked chicken breasts, only 4 spices available, low-fat yogurts, completely skimmed milk, and other such bland heresies. It was a complete lost cause, as I did find a treasure trove of uncooked chicken quarters, but they did require defrosting. There were also various tinned beans, marginally edible vegetables, eggs, butter, salt, and a few other ingredients. Each time my mind came up with an answer, I realised I was still a few jigsaw pieces away from a complete meal. And while I was still trying to conjure up the impossible, an incessant whiny voice kept on trying to interrupt me. On and on, it kept pleading and pleading for me to speak. When I switched off a walkie-talkie voice and resorted to speaking on a prison tannoy system, there was unfortunately no escape. My brain had been starved of food for the past 2 weeks. It was clear I needed at least something to give me some energy. It was a few litres of cartons of custard later, my brain now comfortably wearing, I was able to think up a plan. I decided to have a go at the hostage negotiation thing, so I picked up a walkie-talkie. Admittedly, this was something I'd never done before, so I was initially quite awkward. Hello, I am a hostage taker. That is what I am. I suppose I read out my demands now, don't I? I asked with hesitation.
Hi, thank you for reaching out. You started to have me worried there. So what is your name? I'm Ted.
The voice responded warmly. I, of course, ignored his question and went straight to read out my demands. At first, I was excited about the whole negotiation thing, but it soon became rather drab. I thought it might become a battle of minds and wits with the negotiator, but all he did was keep trying to act as if I was a long-lost friend. Also, initially, I just couldn't seem to create the drama in my voice that I wanted. Perhaps it was simply stage fright. Politely asked the negotiator to stop his chummy charade, but he just wouldn't, and all I got in response was,
Okay, I can sense you're upset. It's a difficult situation that you're in. We can change it and make it better together.
I, of course, told him to stop again, and he gave a,
Yes, I can see where you're coming from. I'll see what I can do, and then we can solve this situation together.
Such positive encouragement started to cause me to long for the opportunity to dislocate a number of his limbs. Instead, as many a fellow Brit would do, I resorted to passive aggression. I gave a tied and bunch of guards a few kicks and kept a walkie-talkie until the negotiator could hear the screams. The far more sombre response of the negotiator helped my understanding of this hostage-taking business to click into place. From here, my confidence grew and I started to have some fun. The haggling was especially entertaining. It was I won't torture and kill this fellow if you do not do this and this sort of thing. I started to daydream and thought perhaps I should have got into sales or purchasing, as I seemed to be quite good at this negotiating business. I'd never been the sort to seek a bargain, but I started to understand why so many apparently enjoyed it. Yes, no one comes near, or I am executing the lot of them in ways that'll make your stomach churn, I exclaimed.
That's the last thing we want, so what do I call you? If we're going to be working together, we might as...
Bloody hell, if I knew I'd have to deal with someone like you, I wouldn't have taken hostages in the first place. Has been non-stop, mindless drivel, all this. Can we be friends? I'm starting to think that I might as well just execute the lot of them, just so I don't have to deal with someone as tiresome as you. I interrupted brashly, and then giggled when I switched the communicator off. To try and get what I needed, I told them that one of the guards appeared to be in a coma. I suggested that the baton must have gone far too deep into his rectum. However, I didn't realise how funny this would strike me, and I couldn't help but chuckle straight after. They didn't see the funny side, though, and urged me to hand him over so I could provide medical attention. I tried to carry on with my haggling, but I ended up giggling again. The concern just added to the hilarity of it. If you want the guard with a baton up his Yes, vagabond. Rectum. Bloody hell. Look, if you want this anally impale, you're going to have to give me a minute. It was at least a couple of minutes of heavy belly laughs before I was able to get myself together. I explained how exchange would take place, what I wanted for the possibly dead guard. I also made it quite clear that any funny business would mean all hostages dying.
Okay, I'm sorry. Don't get hasty. We've heard your demands. I'll see what I can do,
the negotiator said to end our little chinwag. It was evident that the police were all set up just outside the main kitchen door. There's no other entry point into the kitchen. I opened the door slightly enough so that whoever was outside could see the near-naked leash guard with a kitchen knife close to his throat. This being just another threat, so they understood my position. I made sure I stood far enough so that if there were any shooters, they wouldn't have the right angle, and then pushed him out, but held on tight to his leash. I sat behind the door and pulled out a piece of mirrored glass attached to a fork with rubber bands. I poked it out with the door still ajar. I was able to make out numerous police officers with guns drawn and floodlights focused on the doorway. I also saw the large shopping bag placed a couple of meters away from the door. The leash guard obediently and without hesitation picked it up. Then he appeared to wait a second to see if the police were going to do anything to save him. Ha! They did not, and before the guard got any bright ideas, I yanked the leash viciously. The guard staggered back into the kitchen with a shopping bag, and I locked the door, grabbed the bag, and checked inside. And what I needed: ingredients to make a jerk, spice, gloriously ripe plantains, a 6-pack of malt fizzy drinks, sea salt flakes, black peppercorns, a peppermill, an assortment of Scotch bonnet chilies, bird's eye chilies, a fair few cuts of belly pork, chicken stock, and a large tub of vanilla ice cream.
Now it's your turn. Hand over hostage,
the negotiator commanded. I was quite impressed by the order. He was able to demonstrate an authority I hadn't known he had in him, but I still ignored him and quickly moved a bunch of guards in front of the door again. I then put my set of keys into the locks from inside so I'd know they tried to unlock it from the other side. Then went to go cook up my feast. Time certainly flies when you're having fun, as my checker quarters had all defrosted. The thrill to be back in the kitchen and cooking again was such a beautiful feeling. The prospect of being fed hung over me seductively and aroused me with aromas that emanated from my cooking. I thought my skills might have been rusty after such a long hiatus, but I was able to whiz through the preparation and cooking without a hitch. I was in a zen-like focus, and it felt as if no time at all had gone by when I produced a delicious 2-course meal that sat in front of me seductively. Admittedly, I didn't make a start. I was just far too hungry to even consider it. For the mains, I made 8 jerk chicken quarters, 8 jerk pork belly cuts, jerk gravy, a big bowl of coleslaw and chili sauce, rice and peas, and a pile of fried battered plantains with a sweet chili dip. My dessert was a couple of plantain tarts with a litre tub of vanilla ice cream. To make sure the food they gave me wasn't poisoned, I fed the leash guard a portion first. It was an incredibly difficult 10 seconds. The jealous rage I felt that moment was indescribable. But after only one bite, I felt there was enough evidence to suggest there was no issue with the food. After the meal, I sat on the kitchen floor, propped up by the wall, my belly poking out from under my top, and a content smile stretched lethargically across my face. My plan was complete, and it had gone without a single hitch. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I sipped and sipped on the malt drinks as I relished in the afterglow of the meal. The drinks were beautiful and sensual as they cooled down the spices on my tongue. The incessant voice still pierced the silence to try and harass me into answering the walkie-talkie, but I was far too relaxed to bother.
Was this your plan all along?
A meek and puzzled voice asked. I was in a good mood, so prospect of conversation didn't seem daunting. It was a good plan, was it not? I'm fed for brim, and now I can relax, I replied drowsily.
Relax? You know there's a load of armed police officers out there waiting to pull the trigger.
Ah, yes, a minor inconvenience, I said, while shooing the warrior away with my hand. The leashed guard's confusion was easily seen on his face.
But you'll be shot dead or thrown in prison for the rest of your life.
The leashed guard stopped talking, and a look of panic came over him as he thought such inquisitions were going a step too far. He was wrong, though, as I was feeling rather chipper, for wonders how a mood can so easily change after a good meal. I don't plan on being put back in a dungeon. Of course I know what the alternative is. If I don't follow this path, I'll be tortured in those horrible little cells till I have been keeled over dead. There's an inevitability, as even if I escape the sad reality, is that I would eventually be hunted down and returned. It was my stomach that figured this out long ago. It knew that I would not be one for such a vapid existence. So now I am here, feeling heavenly after eating my last meal.
Aren't you afraid of dying?
I let a minute's silence go by before I responded. Well, it doesn't matter if I'm afraid. Death comes to us all, so I might as well have things end on a high note, rather than with a broken soul and in despair. I took another sip of a malt drink and then gave a loud belch. I tasted the fumes from my stomach, and it brought back the memories of how wonderful it all tasted. I then opened up another bottle of malt drink. Strangely, I felt generous to my pet hostage, so I rolled a bottle of malt drink to him. Drink, I ordered. The meek fellow gingerly picked up the beverage and opened it. At first he took a light sip, but then drank it all down greedily.
Thank you for the drink. I'm Jack, by the way. So what do I call you?
He asked with a bit more confidence. To have a name, you need other people to use it. Otherwise, you lose it. I imagine you've heard what some other prisoners call me. That's the name from a past that died long ago. I suppose these days the most common thing people call me is Scruffy Cunt, often before I end up putting a boot in them. So probably best not to call me that. No name is needed. There won't be any confusion about who you're speaking to here. I didn't quite understand why the guard wanted to know so much about me, but carried on with his inane questions, and surprisingly I responded.
Okay, so where did you learn to make the food you made? It smelled amazing.
Cookbooks, trial and error. Well, also that meal's influence came from Home Invasion, a bloody fantastic Jamaican chef. I must confess it is a hobby of mine to do home invasions. Those who are talented in such culinary arts, to politely encourage them to cook me a meal or two. I learned a few tricks of their trade that way. The leash guard looked away and then sheepishly changed the topic.
So, how did you learn to fight like that?
I let a short silence follow his question. I reflected and breathed a heavy sigh. It was not something I had spoken about before to anyone, but I thought, as I was soon to die, I might as well continue the conversation. I'm sure you can gather that I did not have the most loving of upbringings. My father, to put it very lightly, was quite the sadist, although this was the case for some peculiar reason. He did not want me to be what he thought of as weak. Perhaps he thought it would be an embarrassment to the genetic code that he possessed, so he took it upon himself to train me in ways of inflicting and understanding violence from when I was a small child. Part of me suspects that he also did this due to an admiration of the Spartans, as there were quite few similarities in his methods to theirs. I let out another heavy, deep sigh. Well, my boy, my violent neighbourhood further ensured that such skills were continually fed and grown until many years later I became, well, I do not wish to be immodest, but quite a notorious and successful underworld enforcer. This is, of course, much more to it, but it is a long story, and I do find such history boring.
Yes, I'm sorry. I only ask because I've always wished I could fight, but as you've probably seen, I'm not the most capable.
As the leash guard carried on talking about his own insecurities, I looked him up and down. Having eaten, I started to feel that my libido had woken up from its hibernation, and I wanted nothing else but to hunt. I hadn't been one to voluntarily sleep with men before, but perhaps due to the situation I was in, the prospect of death being so close I could feel its breath. For some reason, this glistening life man, sitting cross-legged, wearing only rather provocative tight briefs, brought about a peculiar arousal in me. He was soft-skinned, slim, shaven head, and athletically built. I looked him up and down again. I glanced at his firm behind. The urge to pin him face down, pull down his cute little white briefs, and have my way with him whilst pulling his leash played in my mind. The guard stopped talking as he noticed me leering at him. My gaze caught his, and he quickly turned away. His face turned red, and I noticed he definitely became a little excited himself. As I imagined that it was probably going to be my last fuck ever, I thought it was a good idea to, give men a go. I want to fuck you. I was straight to the point. The leash guard blushed an even darker shade. Now it was palpably obvious what he wanted. I was quite surprised that he even had the urge, but I wasn't going to question his motives. I tugged at his leash and then let my legs fall open. The hostage crawled over compliantly without looking up. Just as he was only half a metre away from me, I heard a soft, crumbling noise of gravel and stone. I didn't even bother rationalising what the sound could be and stupidly ignored it. I grabbed the back of his neck and roughly pulled his head back. He let out a little moan of pleasure. Just as I was about to move things forward, a much louder crumble of concrete cut through the silence. I shoved the guard out of my way and jumped to my feet, my arousal still very much visible in my trousers. I saw the larder door start to open, so I grabbed a heavy cooking pan and hurled it with a thunderous backhand at the door. As the door fully opened, the pan went straight into an armed response unit officer's face, and he immediately crumbled. I then leapt onto the kitchen counter and launched myself across the room at the officer following through behind him. I was inches away from reaching him when I saw his gun pointed at me. I then saw another armed officer behind him with his gun pointed at me, and that was when I heard a quick fire round of bullets. Straight after this, all became pitch black.